to speak. Just a little bit about my background. I started with cooperative extension in 1996, and I've worked as a horticulture agent in various counties. And my goal today is to hopefully transform your view about pesticides. There's just so much misinformation, and I'd like to give you some tools to think about it more objectively. So that's the goal. And just as far as my experience specifically related to this topic, one of my first jobs was working for a contract research organization within the pesticide industry. So I was actually involved directly with some of the studies that go into the development of a pesticide. And so you'll hear more about that. And then in my extension career, each county extension office has one person on staff that's designated as the pesticide coordinator. And I believe Ashley has that designation just like I do. And that person is responsible for providing training to the certified pesticide applicators, like the landscapers and farmers that need that special training because it's part of their professional duties. So, the bottom line of this is that pesticides, when they're used correctly and judiciously, they're safe. All that being said, you may be interested to know that I rarely use them. So there's oftentimes a better choice. In fact, there's a great news article that came out just yesterday. If you do a web search for NCSU bug bombs, you'll find a great news article on a recent study by NC State about the use of bug bombs in your house, or what are technically called total release foggers, and how they're probably not very effective and potentially, harmful in the long term. So that's pretty interesting. The other thing I want to be sure to mention is that you can actually view this presentation online at any time, including right now on your phone. Just open a web browser, and the address is really easy. It's nice and short. It's go. There's no like www in front of it. It just starts with go.ncsu.edu/PGM IPM. PGM being my initials, and then IPM for, well, who knows what IPM stands for? Okay, it's on there somewhere? No, but you got it right. So integrated pest management. So actually, one thing I want to ask, and I should have asked Ashley before I came, what have you guys covered so far?
Botany insects.
Botany insects.
Okay, so this is your third class?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, good. Well, welcome to the Master Gardener program. It is a fantastic program. In my extension career, I've been involved with it from the very beginning, and it is a blast. I mean, I cannot tell you how many days I have been at work and been in some beautiful garden with a bunch of great people and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm making a salary right now. This is incredible. And all the great work that you'll get to be involved with. And the other thing that I've seen over and over and over again is the good, long-lasting friendships that develop out of your experience of the Master Gardener program. So I hope you find that experience as well. But anyway, getting on to it. And Ashley, don't forget, stop me for a stretch break at some point. So. All right, how many of you, this is to start off, how many of you do not use pesticides? All right, keep your hands up for just a minute if you're saying that you do not use pesticides. All right, so if you use this, put your hand down. If you use that, put your hand down, weed and feed. If you use something to control ants and wasps or hornets' nests or cockroaches or anything like that, put your hand down. Okay? All right? Insecticidal soap, put your hand down. Okay? Flea and tick medicines or treatments for your dog or cat. We got one holdout. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. Insect repellent.
Yes, I do.
You use that. Okay, so nobody can answer that question with the answer yes. Because in fact, all of those are pesticides. Okay? And they all of those things have to be treated with the same care that we would treat with any pest management product we use. Okay, so there's some confusion about the definition, obviously, and that's true across the board. It's not unique to this group of people. So let's break it down into its root, Latin roots probably. Okay, so pesticide, we've got a chemical that. Okay, so let's break down the word. What's this root here? Side. Right, to kill, right? Homicide, those kinds of words. Yeah. Okay, so something that kills a pest. And more broadly speaking, it's something that, it's not necessarily just kills, it could be repels. I guess maybe I should stand over here so I'm better in the video, right? You didn't get me to the hair and makeup trailer.
You got your
So, I don't know if I like it. Okay, so kills, repels, or prevents pests, something that manages pests, and we need to take that definition of a pest broadly, right? And this is actually the technical legal definition of this term. We're talking about herbicides. A herbicide is in fact a pesticide. A fungicide is a pesticide. Pesticide is the broad category, right? And then we have all these subcategories. Insecticides kill insects. Rodenticides kill rats. The list goes on. So all of these things are broadly defined as pesticide. There is a common misconception that when you use the term pesticide, you're talking about something that kills an insect, and that's just not the case from a technical standpoint. So, weed killer, and I promise this is not all bullet points, okay? Weed killer, horticultural oils, mothballs, mosquito repellents, rat bait, etc. All these things are pesticides, and they have to be used with the same care. All right, true or false? Organic gardeners do not use pesticides. How many say true? And how many say false? Great. Excellent. Yeah, that is absolutely not true. Organic gardeners do use pesticides, but, and there's really no, legal definition of an organic gardener. It's kind of whatever you want it to be to some extent. But in general, you're using things that have natural ingredients when it comes to pest management, and also when it comes to fertility. You're trying to avoid synthetic, manufactured fertilizer to go with the natural stuff. So. But some are quite toxic. Some of those natural pesticides are quite toxic. And some of them can have off-target impacts. And that's definitely something that we want to avoid. A lot of the, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the, quote, natural insecticides are fairly broad spectrum. And, okay, you've already had insects. What happens if we use a broad spectrum insecticide? What's the risk? Killing beneficials, right? So maybe the predator insects, or maybe the pollinators. So we've got to be careful with them. They're subject to the same laws, and they need to be used with the same caution as any other pesticide. So this is, IPM. This is kind of where we need to start our thinking, and this is where, as educators in the Master Gardener program, this is something that we want to work hard to get across to the general public that we're interacting with, whether it's answering questions one-on-one or giving a presentation to a group or however we're interacting with people. We want to stay focused on this concept of integrated pest management. So, the typical question that somebody is going to ask Ashley or me or potentially you if you're dealing with public is, what do I spray for this particular weed, insect, disease? And you usually need to step back and say, okay, let's look at the big picture here and make sure that, maybe there's something to spray, but maybe there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And I love this quote. I've, carried this quote, used it over and over again. Insects and disease should be seen as indicators or symptoms of stressed, suboptimal plant growth rather than as enemies to be destroyed. The obvious solution is to focus on correcting the growing conditions. So many times when me or Ashley get a phone call or go out to a site and we're looking at an issue and the question is, what do I spray to fix this? The answer is, well, you put it in the wrong place, or you've got a fertility issue, or you've got a drainage issue. So we gotta step back and have that concept in mind. So the basic IPM principles, and this is kind of Paul's version of IPM principles. Okay, so prevent. So do everything we can to prevent the pest. Monitor things, and then if you do see a problem, identify it. Assess the problem, how bad is it, and then decide on your countermeasures. And again, so often, people want to be right here. What do I need? What can I spray? And we just have this mentality that we can buy a product and it's going to make life better, right? So, and that's not always the case. So what do we do about pest prevention? Well, one of the first things we can do is plant selection. And hopefully you will hear over and over again, and hopefully you've already heard it several times, right plant, right place. That is just so crucial. But we can also use plant selection to our advantage. For example, roses, beautiful, fragrant, lovely additions to your landscape. But if you plant hybrid teas, you're going to have to spray them, right? If you don't want them to be covered in black spots and aphids and whiteflies and to bloom well, you're going to have to spray them intensively. If you want to grow nice, beautiful apples or peaches, you're going to have to spray them, all right? But how about knockout roses? Or how about pawpaws or blueberries as an alternative? So sometimes we can go back to plant selection and choose something that will thrive without a lot of interventions on our part. And that's a great starting point when you're looking at your landscape or your garden. In the vegetable garden, we can try to choose things that have disease resistance. So this is just a picture out of the Johnny's catalog for cucumbers, and next to the cultivar name, in parentheses here, it's got these letter codes, CMV, CVYM, and PM. And those indicate that this particular cultivar is resistant to certain diseases. It's resistant to cucumber mosaic virus, some disease that's abbreviated with CVYP, and powdery mildew. So that's a great starting point with plant selection. And the other thing is, going to reference books, and before you install that plant in your landscape or your garden, and find out, hey, is this a good choice? What are the potential problems I'm going to run into with this particular plant? You know, this right here is one of an extension agent's favorites, Michael Durr's Manual of Woody Landscape Plants. Has anybody not heard of that book? It's a wonderful, wonderful book. There should be 2 or 3 copies in your office somewhere probably. And
Copies if you want to look at it.
yeah, it's a great reference for trees and shrubs. So if you're trying to select a particular tree for your landscape or shrub for your landscape, you can go and read not only great information but often entertaining commentary about the plants, and it will tell you what are some of the common insect and disease problems that this plant has. And sometimes they'll just tell you, this is a horrible choice. We shouldn't even be planting this. So he'll give you all that kind of great information. And Michael Durr, D-I-R-R, if you're in the back, D-I-R-R, Manual of Woody Landscape Plants.
Manual of what?
Woody,
Oh, there it is, sorry.
Woody Landscape Plants. And then this is another one of my favorites, the Southern Gardener's Book of Lists. I don't think it's been updated in a while, but you can, almost any planting situation you can imagine, there's a list of 10 or 20 or 30 plants that fit that particular criteria. So sometimes, people get fixated on one plant. I need a screen, therefore I'm going to plant Leland cypress. Horrible, horrible choice, okay? But we can plant arborvitae, wax myrtle, Camellia sasanqua. There's 40 different options that are probably, in most cases, better choices that don't get bagworms or root rot or canker or various other things.
Fall over in a storm.
Or fall over in an ice storm, yeah. So the Southern Gardener's Book of Lists can help you, find those good plants that don't have those insect and disease issues. Bananas, that was at Duke Gardens, okay? That's a fun plant, but you're not gonna produce a lot of bananas in Piedmont, North Carolina. Same thing with cherries. There's just some crops that are not going to do well in this area. English walnuts are probably not a good choice. So just, again, plant selection. And then plant placement. If you got a shady area, plant things that are going to grow well in the shade. That's kind of a no-brainer. Right plant, right place. A tree in a street situation with that much space for the roots, not a good choice. Okay. And then plant installation. And this picture, I love this picture. And it's right over in that office over there, right? See, that's the counter in the Master Gardener office. Somebody brought that in, I don't know, 1990. When did I say I started? Maybe in 2000, 2001. They brought in this plant just like that. Said, why did my plant die? And the first question I asked was, when did you plant it? And it had been in the ground for, I think, a year, more or less. And there was 0 root growth out of that root ball. So that was clearly an issue. I suspect what it was they had heavy clay soil and they measured the root ball and then dug a hole exactly that size and, crammed it in there and then watered the heck out of it, right? So it was sitting in a bathtub for, 3 months and died or struggled. So proper plant installation, you'll learn a lot about that as you go through your training. Proper planting height or depth is crucial, especially when it comes to trees and shrubs. When people call me about tree and shrub issues, what do you think is the first, and it's that question, what can I spray for? and I respond with a question. And what do you think that question is? How was it planted? But actually, even before that is when was it planted? And so if it's experiencing problems within the first, definitely within the first year, but even within the first 5 years, then we look real closely at planting depth. How was the hole prepared? How was the soil prepared? So plant installation is just so critical. So, why is this plant dying back? Why does it have some brown foliage on there? What can I spray? Well, I don't know. But in that case, I would certainly here again ask, when was it planted? How was it installed? And those can be factors. So you got to do a really good job with soil preparation, good deep, and of course, a little bit different techniques for flowers versus trees and shrubs. In the vegetable garden and even in flower beds and fruit plantings, and even shrub beds, we need to look at spacing. How big is that plant going to get? Do we have good air movement through the planting site? Because that's going to help with reducing fungal issues and disease issues. And then proper care. This is all part of integrated pest management, and these are all the questions you have to ask when you're looking at a plant that's not doing well. Was it mulched correctly? Was it watered correctly? Was it fertilized correctly? Was it pruned correctly? Did it get good fertility at the right time, or was it over-fertilized? Was it pruned correctly? You do this to a crepe myrtle enough times, and it's going to start suffering. Not much of a good option there. I mean, that was really an issue with plant placement, because that was not a good choice for underneath that power line, and now they're stuck with having to do that hatchet job to that. So, good irrigation practices, the value of drip irrigation for helping reduce fungal disease issues on the foliage by keeping the foliage dry. Crop rotation, absolutely critical part of integrated pest management as far as prevention. And I'm sure you'll have a good class on vegetables, and you'll learn more about that. But not planting the same crop in the same location, and asking those questions when you're looking at an issue. What was planted there last? And that can be true with flowers as well. So if we're planting pansies in the same bed year after year after year, that can be the same kind. You can build up pest pressure. Part of prevention is taking measures to attract and conserve beneficials. So when you are using an insecticide, using one as best as possible that is targeted to that specific pest, that's not going to harm the beneficials, and taking care that you're not spraying things when plants are in flower and pollinators are visiting. Diversity is a wonderful part of, I think, an overall strategy to minimize pest issues, and it does so much for you. Number one, it looks great, and this was from the Pollinator Paradise Garden in Chatham County that Ashley and I's colleague Debbie Roos installed and maintains as a demonstration garden, well worth a visit. But what we're achieving with diversity is, well, if this plant decides it's not in an ideal location or gets attacked by a pest, we've got so much other going on here that, we've still got a beautiful landscape. And then we're attracting all kinds of beneficials. So we're just hedging our bets in a lot of ways with diversity. And, I understand the desire for a formal landscape. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a design choice. And this is a historical house in Warren County, and I'm sure there's some concern with, honoring the history of that particular home home and landscape. But my gosh, you know, and the reason I went to this was because, you know, a shrub here and there were starting to die. And in that case, it's most likely going to be a root rot issue or a nematode issue. Both of those are soil-borne issues, and those are really hard to manage. And if you replant into that same location, you're just providing more food for the fungus and the nematodes. So it's a tough situation. So if instead we'd had more of an informal landscape, again, that diversity, hedging our bets, maybe alternating 3 or 4 different kinds of shrubs, and of course plant selections, you know, I think these were American, or some kind of boxwood, and you know, again, going back to plant selection, boxwood is prone to root rot and nematodes, and those are, you know, significant issues that we have in heavy clay soils, which is what we have in Piedmont, North Carolina, in many cases. So. Good sanitation is a crucial part of that IPM and avoiding pest issues. So this is frog eye leaf spot on, I think it's frog eye leaf spot on apples. Does that look like an apple leaf? Okay. Yeah, so cleaning up debris from the floor of the orchard, the leaves, the fallen fruit, the mummified fruit, walking through the landscape and, you know, keeping your pruners in your back pocket and just clipping out anything that looks like it's got the start of an insect infestation or the start of a fungal disease problem. That can be a really, really important tool. Many years ago, early in my extension career, I visited a farm where they were raising tomatoes in a greenhouse. And they were raising them, you know, it was just not in pots, but just in the ground on the floor of the greenhouse. They had good rich soil on the floor of the greenhouse. And they were raising tomato crops year after year after year in that same soil, which, whoa, no, do not do that. I mean, that's a big no-no for crop rotation. You're just inviting the potential for soil-borne diseases, and there's a lot of them that affect tomatoes. But the guy was just absolutely diligent about sanitation, and he would, you know, walk through his greenhouse once or twice a day, and anything that looked like an issue, you know, he would clip out, and I think he said he carried a lighter with him and would burn the leaf to take care of it, or put it in a bag and get it off the site. So sanitation can be a really valuable tool in preventing and managing insect pests. This is a twig girdler. I think it's the pecan twig girdler, but you may have noticed in the fall that you see tips of hickories and pecans and maybe some other trees. The tips of the branches look like somebody climbed up the tree and literally clipped them off. So, you know, I've gotten that call before, you know, who went up into my tree and clipped off the ends of the branches? Well, it's a tiny little insect. So this little insect, it lays its eggs in there. And so when you see those, you know, branch tips on the floor of the pecan orchard or underneath the pecan tree, you clean those up, put them in a bag, and get rid of them. So good sanitation. Does anybody know what this is? There's another term for it. The other term for it is a device to transport insect eggs, weed seeds, and fungal spores from one location to another. Okay, so we need to clean our equipment when we're moving from one site to another. All right, and so that was all prevention. That was all the prevention part of integrated pest management. And you know, that was a long section, right? So we need to spend a lot of time thinking about that. And that's, you know, that's one of the takeaways is I'm here to talk about pesticides, but I spent the first, you know, half an hour talking about prevention, and that's crucial, and that's the philosophy of cooperative extension. That's the philosophy of master gardeners across the state. I mean, that is our educational role, is try to help people understand how much they can do to prevent. And then we monitor. So making those regular strolls through the garden to try to catch problems early and deal with them when they're a small problem instead of a big problem. So this is scale insects on euonymus, I believe. And so these little white specks are the little insects that, did y'all talk about those in your entomology? You talk about scale? Okay, so you know what they are. And you see the infestation starting, and clip them out with your pruners, and you're done with it. Here's a tiny little caterpillar that gets on your cole crops, like cabbage and broccoli and things like that. And these little worms, when they first hatch out, they are teeny tiny. And they like to, and there's 2 or 3 or 4 different species of worms that will get on these crucifers, right? And some of them are really light green, and they're 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch long. And when they're not feeding, they like to hang out right next to the leaf vein. I mean, you can barely see them. So, but they grow fast, and so the growth and consumption curve, is like that. So it starts off real small, but very quickly they're consuming a lot of that foliage. But if you're monitoring and you catch that early, when those insects are very tiny and can remove them, then you can prevent a whole lot of damage. These are lace bugs. Lace bugs are a real common pest on azaleas, right? Well, this is the eggplant lace bug. When I first discovered these, I had never heard of them before, so that was pretty, I didn't discover them. I rephrase that. I first observed them, saw them. So again, a tiny little insect on the underside of the leaf a lot of times, so you may just see the symptoms on the top when you're strolling through the garden. So you really got to pay attention. You got to inspect and look closely. Catching things early. This is Downy Mildew on a cucurbit, and that's a fungal disease that can be very detrimental. So you got to pay attention and catch things early. And in an agricultural situation, monitoring, there's whole systems, vetted systems for monitoring, where you walk through a field and you stop every 10 feet and you count insects on a leaf, or you assess the percentage of fungal infection. So, it's a proven strategy in an agricultural situation. It can save farmers money because they can determine the level of infestation, and if it's low enough, they may not have to spray. So we're not quite that technical in home and garden situations, but the same concept, that we want to pay attention, monitor on a regular basis, keep an eye on things, look close. Does everybody have a hand lens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't wait to have one.
What's that?
Don't have one, can't wait to get one.
Yeah, so, and you need to wear it around your neck at all times. And a little chain. No, it's really handy, and in fact, I do keep one in my bag, and it can really tell you a lot about what you're looking at. So. Okay, so we're doing everything we can to prevent, and then we're monitoring, and then when we see something unusual, we need to identify it. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question about the hand rubber. What's a good power to have? They come in all kinds of different 10x, 20x, whatever.
A lot of them will have, and maybe, do you have a couple we could, maybe during the break? A lot of them will have like two lenses that fold up together into the cover, and like they'll actually both have the same power, but then you look through both of them at the same time and it doubles. So you might have using one is 5x and then two would be 10x. So I would say that's a good starting point. I think the one I carry around is 30x. For first, Master Gardener, I think 10x or 20x would be more than sufficient. The 30x comes in handy when you're looking at fungal structures sometimes, and that gets pretty, that's even a little bit advanced for me, being able to identify the fungal structures. All right, so we've prevented, we've monitored, and we found an issue, and we need to identify it. So what do you think is the problem here? Okay, that's an insect.
Insect eggs.
Insect eggs.
Rust.
Rust.
It looks like there's more than one problem there.
Looks like there's more than one problem. All right. Maybe. So what are the symptoms? The foliage is a little off color. Right. Could that be fertility issue? Maybe. Possibly. Environmental. So the short answer is we may not know when we first look at it, because you look at a given symptom and there could be various causes, and sometimes the causes are hard to see, and so you can't make assumptions. If somebody asks you, what disease is this? Well, it may not even be a disease, so you got to be able to step back and assess objectively. So this is actually an insect, and I know you can't see very well, but that right there is a lace bug, and this is an azalea. So, and I realize that's not a great picture, but basically the symptoms are that the top of the leaf starts to look yellowed or bleached out in little tiny speckled spots. And what's happening is these little lace bugs, and they look a lot like that eggplant lace bug I showed you earlier. These little guys have what kind of mouth parts? Piercing, sucking, right? And so it's like a little needle pierces the leaf tissue, and they're sucking out nutrients and chlorophyll, and thus the leaf, if you looked at the top of the leaf, it would start to look bleached out in, like I said, in little specks. So, and then the other thing you see is, and some people commented about this, there's some, it kind of looks dirty, like the underside of the leaf kind of looks dirty. And so what you got there is you got the poop from the insects, and then you've also probably got some eggs. But the bottom line is, if for a given symptom, you really need to do some investigative work to identify what the cause is and not make assumptions. If it's obvious, then it's, Japanese beetle. If somebody brings in a leaf and it's being eaten and there's Japanese beetles there, no brainer. But, sometimes you do have to do a little. And the magnification really helps. Great tool. Another great tool for magnification are these little lenses that you can clip onto your cell phone camera. These are awesome. So, and I have to take my case off to use mine, but it just clips right over your camera, your lens on your cell phone, and it's even got a little internal light, and so you can hold it. You can literally place it on top if it's a tiny little insect or leaf spot. You can literally place it right on top, and it will give you, probably about the same 10 or 20x magnification. And these things are not expensive. They're like 15, 20 bucks. So, yes, sir.
There's an app for that.
There's an app for that. Okay.
So yeah, there's a magnification app that you can get too for your cell phone or whatever, and it'll go up to maybe ×5.
Okay.
But there is one.
Okay.
You can zoom in with your camera.
Do what?
You can zoom in, but that's not really magnified.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you can zoom in with your camera, or you can use the app, but basically with those two methods, well, with the app, you may actually be overriding the internal focusing software on your phone, which would allow you to get closer, maybe what's happening, because most of your cell phones, when you're trying to take a close-up photo, you can only hold it so close, and then it won't focus, and maybe that overrides that, which would be very handy. So, but these actually give you, physical optical magnification. So, yeah, great tools. And then your references, the Ortho Problem Solver or the Southern Living Problem Solver, those are great because you can look up a crop or a specific type of plant and see, okay, what are the common issues that you run into with this plant, and then read the description. Usually there's pictures, so those are handy.
The last I knew, the Fungal Living Problem Solver was out of publication. Maybe,
I have no idea, but I'm sure you could find a used copy. I think Rodale makes one, so variety of options. And don't overlook the value of samples. Soil sampling for fertility analysis is a great tool because, nutritional issues can often look like diseases, pale foliage, dieback, those kinds of things. So soil sampling is always a good bet. And then we can also, again, we're on the identify the problem part of the IPM strategy. And then we can also do samples to NC State. I think Ashley will probably tell you more about that as you go through the class. But we have this great lab at NC State, the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, and we can send samples there. There's a fee of about $20, $25 to get it analyzed. So, you might not want to do that with, my marigold is dying. But, if it's your vegetable garden and, you've struggled for the past 3 seasons to get a tomato crop, might be a good bet. Or you've got, that row of boxwoods and one of them is dying, and you need to know, is it worth going in and trying to replace it, or am I going to run into the same issue? This can be a valuable tool. This is actually a tobacco plant sample that I sent in, and the point is here that when we're sending a sample, we want the whole plant. 9 times out of 10, when somebody brings a sample, an unsolicited sample to the extension office, which is great, that's what we're here for, it'll be one leaf. What's wrong with my plant? We really want to see the whole plant because it could be an issue with the roots, it could be an issue with the soil, it could be an issue with the crown or the stem or the foliage. We want to see the whole plant. But somebody sees a spot on a leaf and they think that's the issue, and it could be something systemic or other issues. And then we're going to assess the problem. And in agriculture, yeah, time for a stretch break? Okay, time for a stretch break. You're going to lead us in stretches?
No, I'm going to pause this one.